Okay, so in the last video, we were looking at multiplying a binomial by a binomial, so something like b plus 2 times b plus 10. And you should have noticed when you did your assignment that the answer you get is always a trinomial. So you always get something like this with 3 terms, so a trinomial. Now we're going to be doing basically the reverse process. I'm going to give you what we considered the answer in the last section, which is the trinomial. And we're going to go backwards and see if we can figure out, well, what 2 binomials did we multiply together in order to get that trinomial? So in your notes, you'll notice that all of the trinomials that we'll be looking at have this form right here. So it's x squared plus bx plus c, where the b and the c are just holding the place of a number. So you'll usually see your squared term in the beginning, and then some number in front of an x or your variable, and then some number by itself on the end. So you'll notice all of our trinomials kind of have that form. So a trend that you're going to see, just get rid of this down here. If you look at our trinomial, our answer, and you look at the 2 binomials that went together to make it, right? The middle term here, or the b, 12, was what you get when you add 2 and 10. 2 numbers on the end of your binomial. And then your last number, 20, is what you get when you multiply 2 and 10 together. And you'll notice when we go through that that is always the case. So when I give you a trinomial, what you'll be looking for is to say, well, what 2 numbers here in a pair of binomials would add together to give me this middle number, and would also multiply together to give me this end number. And you can see the little picture here of somebody working out how you would do that. And so I'm going to go through and show you the same thing here. Okay. So my first question is x squared minus 2x minus 8. So thinking back to what we just did in the previous slide, I'm looking for 2 numbers that when I add them together, they'll add to -2, and those same 2 numbers, when I multiply them, have to give me -8. Now the section that we just finished up was prime factorization, where you were thinking of all the numbers that go together to give you 8. When we're doing this, what I can think of, if I like, off to the side is saying, what numbers multiply together to give me 8? 1 and 8 are the 2 most obvious, and then 2 and 4, and then 4 and 2, and then 8 and 1. So all of these would multiply together to give me a -8. Something else to think about. I didn't have just 8 when I multiply together, I have -8. So you have to think about, well, what do I need in order to get -8 rather than +8? You need one of your factors to be negative. So let's just make everything that I've listed here, the first number, to be negative. So a -1 times 8 gives me -8. -2 times a +4 gives me -8. -4 times 2 gives me -8. -8 times 1 gives me -8. So it could be any combination here. So you say, how do I figure out which combination is it? Well, the 2 numbers have to also add up to -2. So I look at my combinations and see which one gives me -2 when I add them together. -1 and an 8 gives me 7. -2 and +4 gives me a +2. -4 plus 2 gives me my -2. So this is the pair of numbers that I'm looking for. If I fill it in here, -4 and 2, -4 and 2, it should end up being true for both of these. -4 plus 2 does give me -2. -4 times +2 does give me -8. So, then my answer is going to be x minus 4 and x plus 2. So there's my answer to A. Now let's try B. So I have Z, whether it's Z or X, it's all the same method. Get rid of this to give me some space here. So this time I'm looking for two numbers that add together to give me the middle term, which is negative 12. And the same two numbers have to multiply together to give me a positive 35. Now the same method again, I'm going to say, I'm going to write all of the numbers that will multiply together to give me 35. So 1 times 35 works. So I'm just going to write them with the multiplication symbol. 1 and 35 work. 5 and 7 works. 7 and 5 works. And 35 and 1 work. Now, looking at these, all four pairs do multiply together to give me a positive 35. Now I'm looking for two of them that add together to give me negative 12. But we have a problem here. If you look, 1 plus 35 is positive 36, 5 plus 7 is positive 12, 7 plus 5 is positive 12, and 35 plus 1 is positive 36. None of these add together to give me a negative number. But I need this positive number to be there when I multiply the two numbers together. Well, the other way we can get a positive number when we multiply two things together is if both of the numbers are negative. So let's try changing these to a negative 1 and a negative 35, a negative 5 and a negative 7, and so on. So negative 1 times negative 35 still gives you positive 35, still positive 35. Now I can look to see if I've got a pair of numbers that will add to negative 12, right? And negative 5 and negative 7 do add together to give me negative 12. So those are the two numbers that I'm looking for. So we fill it in, negative 5 and negative 7, negative 5 and negative 7. We check to make sure that it works. Negative 5 plus negative 7 does give me negative 12. Negative 5 minus 7 does give me positive 35. So then my answer is Z minus 5 onto a Z minus 7. So there's my answer. Second, copy that down, or you can pause the video. So, here's the next part. And it says, you can always check to see whether your answer that you just got was correct or not. So in the example I just did, let's see if I can select it. I can't select it. If you actually went through and multiplied out the Z minus 5 onto the Z minus 7, right, and I'll just show it here. We'll add a slide in between to make it a little easier to see. So there's my answer again, the Z minus 5 onto the Z minus 7. Board's a little slow here today. And we'll just show it right here then. Oh, there we go. So we said my answer was Z minus 5 onto a Z minus 7. So I want to check to see whether it's right or not. So what I do is multiply it out, same as we were doing before. So I take the first term and multiply it by each of the terms in the second bracket. So I get Z times Z, which is Z squared. Z times negative 7, which gives me negative 7Z. And then I do these two, so that now that I multiply the first time by everything in the second bracket, I go to the second term and multiply it by everything in the second bracket. So negative 5 times z gives me negative 5z, and negative 5 times negative 7 gives me a positive 35. I combine my like terms, which are right here, and then I get that my answer is z squared. A negative 7 and a negative 5 gives me negative 12z, and then plus 35 on the end. So when I take my answer to the previous question and actually multiply it out, then what I get is the original question, or the original trinomial that they asked me to factor. So I know that I'm right in this case. All right. So what I'll get you to do now is kind of stop there. We'll do some questions, and then the next thing I'll show will be a brief video where I take a question like this one here, and we're going to factor it. You'll notice that it's just not written in the order that we're used to. Pretty easy to get around that. And then we'll look at ones that, trinomials that don't have just a 1 out in front of the squared term, which is the only thing we've seen so far. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing in the next video. For now, try some factoring of trinomials on your assignment.